Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Well, despite everything that's going on, I'm still happy that I'm an American.
Amen.
I'm happy to see you all here this evening, and I'm happy to see that there's still people, besides myself and a few others, who still love this country, who are very concerned about what's going on, and are beginning to get angry about what's going on. It's about time that we, the people, begin to stand together. We have to put aside our differences, what few they really are when you really get down to it. And those amongst us can and will defeat those who want to really destroy our country from within. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up in a little city named Cleveland, up in Ohio. I've seen that city go into major decline, and I'm witnessing her reviving herself as I speak in many ways. Right now I'm living in a place called Michigan, outside of Detroit, and I'm going to tell you something. Metro Detroit makes me appreciate Cleveland. It makes me appreciate anywhere. Every time I go back to Cleveland, Thanksgiving time, I'm in a real patriotic mood during Thanksgiving. I kiss the ground. I say, oh, I'm back in America. But anyone who's seen Detroit in recent years knows what I'm talking about. And that is a culmination of horrible thinking that has been allowed to permeate our great republic turned mob rule democracy. And one of the things that was so, that made it so available for a city like Detroit to go the way it did was the destruction of our families. And we can talk about the economic problems that are being exacerbated by the White House occupier, whom I'm called the imam or Muslim in the White House. Certain people don't like to hear me call him a Muslim, but in my humble opinion, he's a Muslim. If you walk like a duck, you are a duck most of the time, unless you're a little child imitating one. But this guy is not just imitating a Muslim, he is one. And even if he isn't a Muslim, then he's even worse because he's a pure traitor, pretending to be an American. And we all know that he is pretending to be an American too, because I doubt if he was even born here. Now, how did we get to the point where an individual, who in my opinion wasn't even born here, an individual who hates this country to death, how do we get to the point where there was such a lack of wisdom amongst the population that they would elect someone of this ilk, not once, but twice? And there's many people who would elect him again if they had the chance. I listen to them every day on the liberal radio station in Metro Detroit. There's a city full of people that would love to have him in there for life. Why? Because they're in league with him. They're in league with his destructive policies. They know that he is bringing this country down. You know that he's bringing this country down when he's announcing that we are in an economic recovery. And then the media has the nerve to say, well, the unemployment rate is now below 6%. It's where it was when George W. Bush was in office. Well, let me ask you something. Is, in reality, in your minds, the economy is now better than it was 4 years ago? Or definitely better than it was 7 years ago? It is not. And even if the employment rate has decreased, the unemployment rate has decreased, what has happened? The quality of jobs has gone down. People are running around now getting little part-time jobs. A lot of your high-quality manufacturing jobs have gone. A lot of banking jobs have also dried up. Headquarter positions in America have dried up in the last few years. 49 major corporations, 49 have taken their headquarters and moved them out of this country. Why? Because this is one of the most oppressive regime in the history of the world now against economic activity. Now, who would have thunk it? The United States of America, which taught the world how to mass produce everything, would now almost make nothing. Who would have thunk that the United States of America, who taught the world how to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world, who gave the world so many wonderful things, inventions, taught the world how to raise your standard of living above that of plant life, and yet now we're giving it all away. How do we get to this position? Many will say that it's through the unions. The unions that began their movement in earnest in the 1930s in places like Detroit, Michigan, and elsewhere, and they gradually took control and priced themselves and priced their corporations out of a position. But it goes deeper than that. I'm of the opinion that wisdom has left our country. If we were a wise people, we would not have allowed the unions to go as far as they did. We would have checked and understood that the unions, what they really meant was to be like an insertion into our economy and to destroy it from within. We would have understood that. We would have understood that our government school system, we would have understood back in the 1960s that they were up to no good. Because even Abraham Lincoln understood that what is taught to one generation dictates the direction the nation takes in the next. We didn't keep that in focus. We did not continue to remind the succeeding generations about the principles that the founding fathers begged us in their words to adhere to. We ignored the wonderful words of a Frederick Douglass, who asked the white man not to coddle the black man after he was allowed out of slavery. He begged the liberals of the day, the abolitionists, please let us alone and let us work our way up, or let us fall on our own merit, and we will do just fine. But no, we know the rest of the history of that and what it has gotten us today. And in every area of American life, we see it is in rapid decline. Up until after the Reagan administration, we had the highest standard of living in the world. Today, we are not in the top 20. I have cousins who live in Bermuda. The family came to this country. They immigrated here in the 1950s and 60s, the older ones, and they loved America. They came here legally, by the way. And they appreciated this country. They all got jobs, went to school, and made something of themselves. But guess what? Their children and grandchildren are leaving this country because the standard of living in Bermuda is now much higher than it is here. And so on and so on and so on. Mother Russia, 13% tax rate. The United States of America, what is it, 35% and higher, depending on your income? We have some of the highest property taxes in the world. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Now, do you seriously believe that our elected officials do not understand what they are doing? When they continue to rise taxes and they continue to ignore us and they continue to pretend, oh, we're going to lower taxes. I'm about lowering your taxes. And when they get into office, what happens? They either stay the same or things get worse, or if they pretend to lower one tax, they regulate us in another direction, and it still costs us more dollars. And they continue to shrink the economic pie through many directions. Then, in concert with the government, through the government schools, you have morons running around demanding $15 an hour to basically do nothing. Than to cook hamburgers in old grease. And so, where is it that, morons have the right to demand much of anything? What they should do is try to educate themselves so that they can be a true contribution to society. But as I said before, all these things, the quality of every aspect of American life has been in rapid decline since after the Reagan administration. We had a slight bump under George W. Bush, but things have speedily gone downhill ever since. And I talk about wisdom leaving our country. During the first go-around with the White House occupier, many of my white Republican conservative friends were running around telling me, "Oh, Ron, we're going to vote for Barack Obama." And I asked them why. Because they were angry at George W. Bush. And Ron, don't you think it's time that we get a black man in office? And I said, I don't know whose time it is, but it's the wrong time for that man. And so, are you losing your minds? I mean, I would ask them, do you need a checkup? Don't you understand? Don't you bother to read about this individual? Why don't you check his voting record in Illinois? Well, that's okay. He's going to do well. He means well. I've heard his speeches. He has great things that I want to hear. Exactly. He says what you want to hear, so that he can get in office and do exactly what he's doing. And why is it that when conservatives get in office, or those who say that they're conservatives, it seems as if they lose the energy or the willpower to push and fight for their principles or our principles, but yet those on the other side continuously push. And one of the reasons why they succeed so mightily is because they are unified. Exactly. They put aside their differences. I mean, they may fight behind closed doors, the Obamas and the Clintons and all that, they may fight like cats and dogs. But when it comes down to their destructive ideals, to what they want to do to America and our children and our rights, they unite, they lock arms, and they get their way. This is the worst president we've had in our nation's history, but yet he has done more for what he wants to do percentage-wise than any other president, conservative or liberal, since I've been alive. I think he's done more percentage-wise of the policies that he wants to do for against this republic than even Ronald Reagan did. Percentage-wise, as far as issues. And one of the other reasons why he is so successful is because we've become less wise with each generation. And that the Bible talks about that. As we continue to turn away from God and his principles, we become like fools. And I'm not calling anyone fools, because there are no fools in this room, but societally, we have become a lot of fools. And that is based on the choices that have been made in our country. The civil rights movement. My father was the first one to teach me about the civil rights movement. He said, "Son, let me tell you something. I know you're taught that the civil rights movement was a wonderful thing for America." He says, "But I'm going to tell you, as your father, it was horrible. Civil rights were nothing more than bastardized rights." I said, "Well, why would you call civil rights bastardized rights?" He said, "Son, because those were not based upon the unalienable rights recognized by our founding fathers, which come from God, which cannot be maligned, twisted, and used for special interest groups." And I asked him again, what are you talking about? He says, "You keep living, and you will see a time when these government rights," which basically that's what civil rights is, government rights, will be used against true Americans. It will be used against individuals, sovereign individuals. And the best case scenario to back that up, what my dad said many years ago, was the situation in Colorado when a Christian baker was forced by the government to bake a cake for a homosexual couple. Yeah. His rights were denied on behalf of the mob of wrong choice homosexuals. A total reversal of the philosophical base of our founding fathers. And so, as all of these things continue to roll out, I am amazed at the lack of energetic protest or actions on our side. I remember several years ago, I asked Congressman Mike Rogers personally, I said, "Sir, if you would just do one thing, do me one favor. Go to your fellow congresspersons and tell them that if you want to stem the tide against American headquarters going to other countries, if you don't want to see this happen, open that floodgate, all you have to do is put in a bill that would make sure that the American corporate tax rate is always the lowest on earth. Personally, I would get rid of it if it were up to me. But politicians being what they are, I said, just keep ours the lowest and we will remain competitive. And that would be a first step in reestablishing capitalism in America. And he said, oh yeah, that's a really great idea. I said, and it's really great because that's an idea that won't cost us anything. You don't have to worry about a budget for it. All you have to do is enact it, and it would pay for itself in the long run through more economic activity. And of course, it went nowhere. I never heard about it, did you? No. And this is what I'm talking about. Now, had he been a supposed liberal politician, and I would go to him and say, well, how about some special interest issue? I don't know, just think of anyone you can think of. And I would say, well, push that. Do you know that liberal would have gone in there, and they would have been fighting on it. And one of the secrets, one of the reasons why the Soloniski types, these liberals of today, continue to push and push and push, and they're never satisfied. Have you ever noticed how they're never satisfied?
Yes.
You come up with a solution, it is done, they got their way, and then they go back to square one complaining as if nothing ever happened. I'll never forget, back in the 1980s, I was still in Cleveland, and because the liberals and the environmentalist wackos were going against diesel fuel for major transportation, public transportation systems. So Cleveland, being the city it is, said, you know what, okay, cool. We're going to turn all of our buses over to natural gas. Because the liberals at that time were saying, well, natural gas would be much better, blah, 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 blah. Well, what they didn't understand, what the liberals didn't really realize, is that someone would actually do that and come up with a way of doing it and making it economically viable for the city and all of that. It saved the city of Cleveland a lot of money, helped them buy a new fleet of buses because they saved more money and all of that. And guess what happened after that? The liberals flipped and complained so much about natural gas, saying that it's harmful to dig it out of the earth, and they just went to Nutsville about it. So the city of Cleveland threw up their hands and went back to diesel. So, my friends, what we have to understand is that the liberals will never ever stop. They will legislate this United States of America into a dunghill of nothing if they have their way. I would like you, as my fellow Americans, to never ever allow yourselves or anyone you know to succumb to what is called white guilt. Recently, I was listening to a talk show host, a fellow that most of us don't know. His name is Rush Limbaugh. And he was joking and talking about white guilt. And there was a case in, I forget which state, where a young fellow wrote about himself being embarrassed about his whiteness. And that he had to basically put himself under a bushel and hide because, oh my God, I'm a white guy, and my whiteness is just shameful. And I wanted to shout at the radio, how moronic can people be? You are what God created you to be. And you should be proud as Americans, not as white Americans, but as Americans who happen to be white, just like I'm an American who happens to be black. Big deal. Be proud of it. Say, yeah, I'm white, so what? Get over it. And I'm an American too. Take that. And we're going to take our country back. And we're going to join together with all those of like mind, no matter where they come from, no matter what color they are. And we're going to fight together and win this country. We are not going to allow our country to be set up so that the succeeding generations have a lower standard of living than we do. We're not going to do that. We have a lot of goals that we can set as Americans and that we can fight for. We should not allow the liberals to dictate the philosophy, or the thinking patterns of the day. We have to become more ironclad. We have to become more steadfast in what we know is right. Because one thing that history has in store for us, first of all, it repeats itself. And history has also proven in the Bible and in American history that if you stand strongly on what is right, and if you fight, as Newt Rockney said, fight, however God chooses you, tells you to fight, because we all have to pray and we have to seek for his wisdom, and we find our path and we succeed in it. And we have to become unafraid, unapologetic, and unwilling to be pushed around by those who would want to push America into the sea, into the ash heap of history. I, for one, pledge my solemn duty and all my energies to join with you and join with Americans all throughout this great land to fight until the fight is over, which means we have victory. I'm convinced that we can win this war. It is a societal war, but that's okay. Wars are meant to be won. I'm always marveled about how the underdog comes up the winner. The story of David comes to mind in the Bible. He was only 17 years of age. And at the time, Goliath was just selling wolf tickets every day. He was just barking and barking. I'm going to destroy Israel. I'm going to wipe you out. And David is like, what are they doing? They're doing nothing. They're shaking in their sandals and just running around like little chickens. And so his father told him to take some bread and cheese, basically pizza, to the front lines, to his brothers, and give them something to eat. And so he started talking with the soldiers and said, why is it that we allow this man to insult our God? See, David took himself and his nation out of it, just as George Washington did when he battled against the British. He didn't personalize it. He says, Lord, they're attacking you, and I'm insulted about that. And so he finally went to Saul, King Saul, and got permission from Saul to do battle. And we know that he walked up to Goliath, who just mocked him and said, this little ant, I will stomp you and crush you away. And David looked up and said, very politely, he said, sir, you have insulted my God and my country, and I am going to kill you. And I'm going to cut your head off, and I'm going to feed your head to the fowls of the air. He didn't go to Nutsville. He didn't shout and go crazy and all that. He said what he was going to do, that God gave him the power to do, and he did it. Ladies and gentlemen, you and I and all of us who love this great country have to basically do the same thing. I don't mean physically, but we have to make up our minds what we are going to do in a non-stop basis to win our country back. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to find a way to force those who we've even been fooled by to vote for them to do the right thing. We're going to have to make it more difficult for them to do the wrong thing than for them to do the right thing. For too long, these elected officials have been benefiting off of our backsides while they're doing more and more against us. Billions and billions of dollars for what? Just the other day, $450,000 spent on a study to see how people ride bicycles. Please. And you add that up to the tune of billions and now trillions of dollars that who produced? We, the working people of America. I would like us to remember Lech Walesa of Poland. He was tired of communism, just as I'm tired of communism today in America. And if you don't believe that we have communism today, look at the Communist Manifesto and you will find out that every plank of the Communist Manifesto is being enacted against we the people of America today. So if that isn't communism, someone please tell me, correct me, and tell me what it is. Okay. It is communism. And so, what we need to do, my friends, is, here's another bright idea, taken from Lech Walesa. He urged the people of Poland, with the exception of I believe, police officers and maybe doctors, to take off work for 21 days. Just stop all economic activity. And on the surface, people say, well, why would you do that? Well, why wouldn't I? First of all, it would quickly remind the government, it would be just long enough to remind the government where it gets its wealth from, where it gets its power from. Who is truly the straw that stirs the drink? Who is the head? We are the head. We shouldn't be the tail. These politicians try to treat us like we're the back end. No, they're the back end. They're supposed to be our servants. That's what I read. So why do we not allow, why do we not force these yahoos that we vote for to do their jobs? If I don't do my job, jobs I've worked in the past, if I didn't do my job, I would have gotten fired. I used to have a news anchor position in Cleveland where I went on the air at 6 a.m. every day. Well, what if I decided, well, you know what, I'm not going to go to work, or if I cursed on the air, did something stupid, I'd be out of there. So why shouldn't people we vote for and pay, we're the boss, but yet they've reversed the mentality as if they're the boss. Ooh, that's the federal government. Ooh, Lord have mercy. And we just allow them to get away with so much. How dare we have a federal government, which is, by the way, the largest government in the history of the world, the greatest spending entity in the history of the world, the most wasteful entity in the history of the world. How dare they continue to waste away this wonderful economy and then tell us and expect us to believe that conditions are improving. They think, well, if we just tell them it's getting better, the unwashed masses will believe us. Well, there's a lot of us who are washed in the truth, and we don't believe it, and we're going to do something about it. Are you with me?
Oh, yeah.
Please. Now, I believe that if we were to do something like that, and sometimes people say, well, Ron, that's an inconvenience. Well, our country being dropped out of the top 20 as far as standard of living, and all these jobs that have left our country, that's a big inconvenience. And if we don't do something drastic, and maybe it's a little inconvenient, trust me, if Obama gets his way, there won't be any jobs for you to go to, or for your children or your children's children to go to. There won't be any jobs. Then what are you going to do? You'll be on permanent vacation. Yes, indeed. So we have to do something now while there is time. There isn't a whole lot of time. It's not like it was back in the 80s or the 90s under the Clintons when we were all worried about things going on under the Clinton administration. I tell you one thing, if I ever have the displeasure of meeting Bill Clinton, I'm going to have to apologize to him because I thought he was the worst. I thought he was as bad as could get. Man alive. I'd have to resurrect Woodrow Wilson and say, buddy, I actually thought you were the worst. Jimmy Carter, is he still around? Yeah. I'd have to apologize even to that guy. Obama beats them all. He's the most traitorous. He is the most lying. He is the most undermining in our nation's history. Our military is now so small. If there were a world war, a major, huge battle breaking out right now, China and Russia acted on what they're planning to do, all of a sudden, with their prosperity, our lack of manufacturing plants, we can't turn them over now because most of them are mothballed or worse. So we're in a heap of hurt, folks. But I'm telling you, it is not over. It doesn't have to be over. It can be bad, but it can be reversed. History has proven this time and time again. You take the Second World War. We did not have the greatest technology of that day. It was the Germans that had the V-1 rocket. It was the Germans that had the first jet aircraft that were much faster than ours. But we had something that was greater. We had faith. We had He who shed His grace upon America, who blessed those mighty soldiers, who blessed our efforts. Yes, we lost a lot of mighty men, but ultimately we won. Those men are in heaven. They didn't lose anything. We lost because we lost them, and we're heartbroken. But they've been in heaven because they fought the good fight. And so we, my friends, must, like the founding fathers, in every struggle, go to our Father in heaven and say, Lord, grant us wisdom. Grant us the way. Grant us the chutzpah to not back down. I love the story, and I tell this often, about George Washington and the mighty men of valor that he fought with in New York State. He got bad intel. He thought he was going to be dueling with 4,000 British soldiers. Well, it turned out he was surrounded by 20,000. And the Brits, being the gentlemen that they were at times, informed him that, well, you can surrender now, or we'll let you sleep on it and surrender in the morning. If by then you don't surrender, we'll just, do what we're going to do. And George Washington took them up on their offer. Okay, we'll sleep on it. What he did was he went back to his men. They got on their knees and prayed to God Almighty for help. And when that thick, mighty fog rolled in, they said, Lord, we cannot even see the hands in front of our faces, but we're going to start walking in faith. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and they literally walked through the lines of the British soldiers. And the British soldiers didn't detect them or ever see them, nor did they see the British soldiers. But by morning, they were long gone. And that's just one of many, many examples in our American history where we have gotten favor and thus victory in the long run. All it takes is faith and action. Faith and action together brings victory. We don't have to allow ourselves to be lulled into thinking that, when the Negro Thought Police, the NAACP and all these people, whether it's Jesse, hey, where's the camera? Jackson. Or Al, windbag Sharpton. When they're running around trying to make you guys feel guilty and talk about how racist and how stupid this country is, whatever. Wait a minute. Talk about stupid. If you all are not outraged over the fact that Al Windbag Sharpton may be called upon to help the White House occupier pick the next, I can't even say it, for the Supreme Court, if that doesn't enrage you, if the thought of that doesn't enrage you, I'll just leave right now. I mean, seriously, I know that probably will not happen, but liberals are thinking about it. They would gladly do that because they would love to put the most anti-American, whatever, however you want to describe them, into the Supreme Court. They would love to do that. I mean, they want to put people in there that would make Ruth Bader Ginsburg look good. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the White House occupier put a Muslim in the Supreme Court. These are ticklish times, folks, but we don't have to worry. We need to get together and promote action and wisdom and faith. It's nothing more than doing what you have to do. You all have family budgets. I think most of you know how to keep your budgets in line and you're not running around in super debt and all of that. Well, if we can do it, and through tough economic times, we have to cut back. Why is it that a Senator Carl Levin gets to live like a king, more luxuriously than King David did? And unlike King David, Carl Levin, and all these people, Nasty Pelosi and all these guys, who live much better than King David, but yet, because of their actions, we the people are living more and more like serfs. More of our countrymen are suffering at the hands of these evildoers. And yet the remaining ones of us in the patriotic movement, we get tired. We get discouraged. Well, I'm encouraged in the fight. When somebody brings the fight to me, I'm going to fight back. And I urge you to do that, do the same. Do not allow even family members to dissuade you. I, for one, have been disowned by many family members. Some of them say that I'm dead. But yet I feel more alive than ever before. Because I know that this is a great cause. I know that God still loves America. His word says that we will humble ourselves and we will offer up prayers and seek his forgiveness. Yes, God does forgive sins. He does forgive us for not fighting for what is right in this country that he blessed us with. He will forgive us. He forgave the children of Israel. He blessed them after they messed up. So why won't he turn around and bless us? Moses said, I think it was Moses, Solomon, who said there's nothing new under the sun. History repeats itself. And I can guarantee you, as sure as you're sitting there in these chairs, that if we were to do these things, seek his forgiveness, and pledge our unity with him, and pledge our love to our country that he blessed us with. This is a gift. America, to me, is a gift. My dad called it a gift. And people, I've had people in past presentations ask me, well, Ron, why is it you, a black man, loves this country so much? You've been like this since I remember you in high school. You were talking about this America, how great it is, and all this kind of stuff. Why? And I simply say, why not? I said, you can look at a glass as half empty, or you can look at it as half full. My glass is always more than half full. And no matter what you think is against you here in America, and I tell people, I say, well, if you think it's so bad here, I will conduct a fundraiser for you. If you don't have the money, I will send you to Lebanon, Saudi Arabia. How about Yemen? Oh, yeah, why not? I'll send you to those places. Since you think it's so bad here, or to Cuba, and I said Cuba, that's how Jesse Jackson says it. And you see how, but here's the thing, here's the catch. Those people, the thing that I caught on to in recent years, those people believe in that philosophy. So they're like, no, I'm not going anywhere. We're going to change America into that. So they're very defiant. They're digging in their heels. Most of you probably don't know this, but the Congressional Black Caucus, every single year, they go to Cuba. You know why they go to Cuba? On our tax dollar dime? Because they get instructions from the regime in Cuba in how to gradually undermine America through agitation. That's why they go there. And they get on television and talk about civil rights, this, that, and the other, and we need our rights. Just, was it yesterday? Was it last night or the night before? I mentioned at a gathering. And I didn't even know what happened because I couldn't get on the internet to look at any news stories. But I talked about preachers, black preachers, getting together and kissing the backsides of Muslims in Dearbornistan. And lo and behold, I found out today that last evening a bunch of preachers got together with the Muslims in Dearbornistan, and guess what they're fighting for? They want to put, they weren't even talking about Sharia law, but they wanted to put certain Muslim proclamations above our Constitution. This is what they're pushing for. And so, here are these people, they're running around saying that they're of God, they're of Jesus, but yet they're hooking up with Muslims. Now, let me explain to you how retarded this is. First of all, they're bitter fools. Here they are, preachers, big fat preachers. They eat a lot of chicken, gospel birds they call it. Probably ride around in an old big fat Cadillac or something. And they're glomming on to Muslims. And I don't know if you all know about Muslims. Muslims hate black people. They hate us. I've read their Quran. You know what they call people like me in their Quran? They call us two things. That we should be slaves, and they call us raisin heads. So, this is in print, but yet they get on television and they tell us that they're a religion of peace. We just want to build little mosques where in America, and we can come and worship together. We love everybody. Yeah, they love us so much, they want to kill us to death. I remember there is a case in Minnesota where a guy, he was blind, still is blind. He called for a taxi. And he says, sir, I need a taxi. I'm going to whatever, maybe Eaton Center in downtown Minneapolis. So that's a nice place. And all of a sudden, the gentleman over at the place says, let me ask you, do you have a dog? And he says, yes. I cannot send you a taxi. I won't send you a taxi. Well, why, sir? Because it's against the Muslim religion to allow dogs in our taxi. We hate dogs. And so the man got angry, as I would have, and he took the case to court. And guess what? The ruling came out to be. He lost the case on religious grounds. Yet at the same time, these same liberal judges wanted to rule against the Christian cake baker. Mm-hmm. Now there's a reason for that. It goes beyond just a difference of belief. Here's the thing. They know that due to dumbing down, brainwashing, or sheer cowardice, most Americans are wimpus Americanus apologeticus. And they know that conservatives and Christians don't fight back. And he just backed away after the hearing and all that. He's just gone on with his life. The weak and droopy daffodil. But when the liberals are rightfully ruled against, they fight. They come back stronger. They protest. They go to Nutsville. And they try to put fear in people. Oh, we don't want to upset them. Well, it's about time that we do upset them. It's about time we put fear in them. It's about time that we let them know that we're not going to back off. And it's as simple as that. I don't ask the liberals to like me, but I do demand that they respect me. I demand that they respect you. I demand that they respect America. And the only way that they're going to do that is once they really see that we're serious about respecting America, respecting our rights, loving our God. One of the things, and to prove my point, back in history, in the early part of the 20th century, when the socialist communists in Michigan wanted to take over America, they thought, man, we can do this thing now. But then they realized it was very difficult. You've heard the term the Bible Belt? Mm-hmm. Well, that term came from the communists because they were making fun of places like Middle Ohio, into Indiana, Nebraska, and all of that, all those areas where there's been a lot of Christians. And they called it the Bible Belt. And they said, well, we can't take over America right now because there are so many Americans. There's three things about those people. My God. They believe in the flag and the Constitution, and that they love this country. They love their families are intact. And the biggest insult to them of all is that they love their God. And they knew, see, the communists knew that they couldn't destroy us because of our close connection with God. Now, if they had the gumption to understand that and knew that they had to work through the government school system to stupefy, and we allowed them to get their way to take God out of the schools. And then after they took God out, they took our American history out. After they took our American history out, now they're messing with the math. Now you have Common Core. What's next? What are we going to continue to allow these people to do? I mean, pretty soon, if they have their way, a future generation of Americans will be so stupid, the only thing they'll be able to do is, someone will have to roll up the newspaper and spank them and tell them, no, you don't go to the bathroom in the middle of the floor. I mean, really. I mean, they want us to be so stupefied that we won't know the difference between come here and go sick 'em. So, my friends, the bottom line is that we have to re-adopt what the Founding Fathers sought. There was a huge battle in the Founding Fathers in their meetings. There were two extremes. One was called ruler's law, where it was total dominance by a central government, in which they told you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, and with whom. Then you had on the other extreme, anarchy, where there was no rule of law, nothing. So they settled on people's law in the center. And they derived that concept, yes, through common sense thinking and all of that, but they understood when they studied a little bit of history, all the way back to the children of Israel, when they broke down the government under Moses, when he got the instruction from his father-in-law to break it down, and when you study it all the way down, it was based upon the rights of the individual, because God judges us as individuals. He looks at everyone the same way, but as unique, precious individuals. And he loves us all mightily. And the Founding Fathers understood that. And so, we, my friends, have to make sure that we remember that and pass that down. Is it going to be difficult? Yes. But at one time, the liberals were in the minority. You can go back to the 1950s or whatever, or the 1940s. They were in the minorities. The church had real influence in our country. I grew up in Cleveland. There was a big Catholic church there. You go up to Little Italy, there's a nice Catholic church there. It was built in the 1800s, which still is filled every Sunday. And churches were everywhere. I remember, I'll never forget this. We were sitting on a stoop across the street from a church. And talk about how much respect the church had. There was a drunk. He was stumbling. He was walking down the street. You remember the Andy Griffith Show? Mm-hmm. And what was his name? The guy who was a drunk. And he'd lock himself in jail at night. Well, anyway, this guy was walking down the street in that fashion. And he had a funny little hat on. And do you know, I was watching this guy from across the street. When he walked in front of the church, even in his drunk stupor, he took his hat off while he walked by the church. And when he got past the church, he put his hat back on. That's spiritual. Because, the Spirit of God was in our nation. It was in our society. Were we perfect? No. But we were a good society. Perfection was the goal of America. That is why the great minds of the world were attracted to our country, like Wernher von Braun, whose brain conceived the technology which, when President Kennedy stated the vision that we could put a man on the moon before the end of the century, the technology was there. God blessed America where that man chose to come here instead of putting his technology. He could have gone to Russia or stayed in Germany or wherever. But he came here because he wanted to come to a land of freedom and be a blessing here. And so we have to first ourselves reestablish these principles. And once again, reconnect with God. We've got to. We owe it to our future generations to do this. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm sure everyone knows the answer to this. You all love your children and your grandchildren, am I correct? Yeah, real easy answer. Well, we have to start really acting like it. And just like the greatest generation has sacrificed for us, we today have to sacrifice for our children and our children's children. Because if we don't, the Muslims will control America like they control Dearbornistan, Michigan today. If we don't, neighborhoods throughout America will be governed or ungoverned like those of Ferguson, Missouri a few weeks ago. If we don't, there will be such anarchy and breakdowns of our infrastructure system. This is what they're planning on too. That's why they want to spin us into oblivion so they don't have the means and the wherewithal to repair our infrastructure. This is why, it just goes into any subject. I get to speak in any direction. This is why the liberals do not allow the Keystone Pipeline, because that would strengthen American independence. There is no reason, there is no logical reason on God's green earth that we should be dependent upon one drop of oil from outside of the United States. It has been discovered that we have as much or more than the rest of the world. And this is something that I've said since I was in high school. I used to tell my classmates that the United States has so much of everything. We are so blessed in such a unique way that we could literally take out an ad in the New York Times, well, put it on Facebook today, and picture a backside on it and tell the world to kiss it. and we could take our individual states and reestablish Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania as industrial centers, the Carolinas as the textile centers, Wisconsin, everything that they produce. We could reestablish correct farming principles and reestablish capitalism and open up the tens of thousands of acres that are now that have been captured by the federal government, and put that back into the private sector, and that it would come onto the tax rolls. We could demand and make sure that we once again have a mighty military that would be so strong that, as Ronald Reagan used to say, we would have world peace through strength. We would have the common sense to trust but verify when it comes to dealing with international negotiations for our interest. And usually, if it's for our interest, it actually helps the world. America is set in such a position that when we are doing well, the rest of the world does better. Because they're watching us all the time. There's a man named Trevor Loudon who's been traveling this country. I had the chance to spend a lot of time with him when he was in Michigan. Spent the weekend at my house, and we talked into the wee hours. And he just poured out, as he does to audiences around the country, about how the world is waiting for America, meaning you all, to get it together. Because even our enemies know the greatness that is within all of you. America is the greatest nation and has been the greatest nation in the history of the world because you all and patriots around our great nation are great. Greatness is in you, thus making America great. Because America and any country is nothing more than a bunch of people. And as my dad used to say all the time, a government is nothing more than a reflection of the people. And it is high time that we change our reflection so that we stop electing individuals like the White House occupier Imam, like cowardly lions, like John Boehner, who sit idly by and enjoy the fruits of non-labor while the republic is burning down around him. And so, and I mentioned him because I'm personally hurt, because I know Mr. Boehner, and I knew him when he was governing in Ohio, and I really thought he would carry his conservative attitude that he displayed in Ohio into the nation's capital, that it would be consistent. Now, every once in a while, he blurts out something, and what he says is usually correct, but it's not enough. We're in a fight for our very lives, and this guy actually just takes it very casually. But yet, the imam in the White House is working nonstop. He has everyone thinking that he's just hitting the golf ball all the time. But trust me, he is daily making tens and dozens of federal appointments that are working against us. He is writing more and more regulations than any other president in our nation's history. This man is not an idiot. people call him an idiot, I cringe. No, he's very evil. He represents evil. And most evil people of that ilk are not dumb at all. And we cannot afford to even look at them as idiots, because if we think of them as idiots, we're not going to fight as hard. Because idiots usually fall on their own face and make a fool of themselves. But have you noticed, these so-called idiots have been doing the damage to the country and getting away with it. But yet the supposed intelligent conservatives and the patriots have been watching on the sidelines. I mean, when you have an establishment guy like Mitch McConnell condemning the Tea Party folks, well, I hate to remind him, but it was the Tea Party folks that saved the backside of the Republican Party in the last elections. If it wasn't for the energetic Tea Party folks, I think that by now the Republican Party would be considered, well, it's just another little party, and it's all the Democrats and the little Republican Party. The establishment Republicans, for their own sakes, need to do a better job of embracing the true Tea Party conservatives. And I'm not talking about when they allow those loons into the Tea Party that pretend that they're Tea Party folks or that they're united with them. I just hope that there aren't a whole lot of libertarians in the room. That's my hint. But anyway, I've been around libertarians, and I just had to learn the hard way. Can't trust them either. They'll rail and say, no one knows the Constitution better than we do. But they understand. They support almost everything that undermines the Constitution. It undermines the power of America. And I cannot. Oh, and they're anti-Israel. And how can we as Americans be anti-Israel? I mean, that makes about as much sense as, well, voting for Obama.
Yeah.
So, my friends, we have to get back to the rudiments of greatness. We have to get up every morning and make certain declarations. We have to start declaring that America is great. And that greatness is in us. One of the reasons why I admire Frederick Douglass so much is because in the midst of slavery, when in all intents and purposes, it was all over for him. There was no way out for him. But he himself decided that he was not a slave. Decades before he freed himself, which, by the way, was decades before Lincoln said, you may go. He decided, he declared every single doggone day that he is free. And he spoke this no matter how badly he was whipped, chained up, starved sometimes, just because they could do it and get away with it. He always said every day, I'm a free man. I'm going to be free. And he thanked God for his freedom. Sometimes, when it seems least likely that a thing is what it is, that is when you have to declare it the most. When you don't see it. It's one of the things my dad taught me. Long before I broke into broadcasting, I had to declare, I'm going to get into broadcasting. When I heard Paul Harvey at 8 years old, when I grow up, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have my own commentary. Didn't tell another human being, but I declared it, and it is now true. And it has been true for many years. And so, in that same vein, we as Americans have to declare that America is recovered, that America is restored, that America is once again the envy of the world. We have to make these declarations. And as we, the people of America, start really believing that, we will start walking as individuals. And as we walk that as individuals, we will automatically start linking up and unifying in our efforts to restore constitutionally limited law in our republic. That's one of the ways how you gain victory. It starts right here. Then it goes into action. What you declare, what a man thinketh, so is he. What you saith, it becomes. And so, rather than curse our nation and just concentrate on the problems, we must concentrate on the solutions and speak those things into existence. The Bible says to speak those things that are not as though they are, and they will become that way. I paraphrased it, but that's what it means. And so, when people were telling me when I was much younger, and they said, well, Ron, you're not going to go into broadcasting. Who do you think you are? You're not going to be a morning news anchor in a major metropolitan area. You're not going to do that. That's just for white boys. And I said, oh, well, leave me alone, oh foolish one. I would just cut people out like that. If you're going to be a negative Nancy, I have to tell you goodbye, because I'm on my road. And I'm going to see this thing through. God gave me this talent. This is what's going to happen. If you're living, keep living, you will see it happen. Now from afar, because I have to excuse you from my life because you're negative. And so we as Americans have to do that. If you find friends that don't want to join you in positively speaking about your nation, get away from them. Get away from them, because if you cannot convince them, then you have to break away in order to strengthen yourself and strengthen yourself with others who are of a like mindset. Birds of a feather flock together. Capitalists do not do well surrounded by communists. The twain don't meet. Christians don't do well mingling with atheists. And so we really have to come down to this lie called diversity, where everyone has to be so included in everything. Well, God didn't say that. God said to congregate with like-minded individuals. God didn't say only congregate with black folks or Chinese folks or white folks. He said like-minded. So I'm just here to remind you and to tell you, folks, that it is not over, no matter what they tell you. And so, another story. In fact, this is a letter. And I just want you to allow me to answer the simple question on how or what we can do to reestablish our constitutionally limited republic. Now, these are through the elegant words of the great American patriot Samuel Adams. This is a letter that he wrote to James Warren in 1779. A general dissolution of principles and manners will more surely overthrow the liberties of America than the whole force of the common enemy. While the people are virtuous, they cannot be subdued. But once they lose their virtue, they will be ready to surrender their liberties to the first external or internal enemy, invader. How necessary then is it for those who are determined to transmit the blessings of liberty as a fair inheritance to posterity, to associate on public principles in support of public virtue. There it is, folks. We must be virtuous. We must always seek to do what is good. Are we going to make mistakes? Yes. Only one perfect human ever walked the earth. That was Jesus in the form of man. And it is guaranteed that we're going to fail. If you read the founding fathers, they had many faults, but their good outweighed their faults. And they did not allow their faults to overcome the mission that God had for them to partake in. And that is what we must focus on. The good, the greatness of America, the blessings of this wonderful land. I am continuously amazed at her beauty wherever I go, whether it's out in Sedona, Arizona in the mountains, whether it's in Pennsylvania, whether it's, believe it or not, there are beautiful places in Ohio. Wherever I go, with the exception of Detroit maybe, I'm amazed at her beauty. You know, sometimes my public relations agent and myself have had discussions about New York. She says, I hate this place. I want to get out. I want to get out. But I'm amazed at her beauty when I see the mountains of upstate New York and all of that. And when I see the greatness of New York City, that vast city, I'm enraged at what this communist that they've elected in New York City wants to do to that city. All those buildings represent thousands of jobs and greatness, dreams. And yet, we foolishly allow the liberals to come in and control the direction of this nation, the direction of our cities, of our teeming cities, and watch them decline. There is no way on God's green earth that New York City should be overshadowed by Dubai or what's that city in Shanghai. There's no way that that should happen. But if we continue to focus on the evil in America, our enemies who are evil will overshadow us. They will be allowed to overshadow us. That is what happened in ancient Israel. I believe that Israel was meant to be as great and powerful as Rome. But they continued to break God's heart and do the wrong thing. And they became scattered throughout the world. But God is calling them back to Israel. And they will have been a mighty, powerful people in such a small land because God is with them. And trust me, all we have to do is call out to God and he will be with us again here in America. We still have the infrastructure. We still have all the wonderful minerals and the oil, all the natural resources. We have the largest single collection of fresh water in the entire planet. So we have it all here, folks. It is still here. It's not been taken away. Although our government is trying to sell a lot of our land to China at wholesale prices, supposedly to pay down the debt. What an insult to common sense and how evil that is. This government that we elect wants to give away our blessing to our enemies. Now, in my humble opinion, that is a rogue government. This government no longer respects the mother that stays home and raises her children and points them in the right direction. They don't want dad to be the one to go out and be the breadwinner for the family. They don't want the U.S. dollar to be so strong that that you would only need one job in the household to take care of the whole family like it used to be before I was born. They don't want that. That's why they kept jacking taxes up so both mother and father had to get out just so they could keep bread on the table. And we just kept allowing it. All we do is try to work harder to keep up with what they're doing. No, we need to put the brake on what they're doing. And they do what we tell them to do for our benefit, for our nation's benefit. How dare we just sit idly by and allow them to curse our blessings, what was meant for us and our children and our children's children. When I used to visit countries around the world, when my sister lived in Paris, and when she took me to Greece, I'll never forget, on Independence Day, I was just sitting there by the seashore, and I don't know why, I started singing, well, I'm not a very good singer, but I was singing our national anthem, and I didn't realize I was loud enough for anyone else to hear. I was just sitting there staring out into I think we were on the island of Patmos or something, where John the Baptist had lived. And there were other people there, other tourists there and everything, and some Grecians. You know, those people came over to me and joined me in song about America. And these Grecians were just telling me, oh, how I love America. I love that country. It is so great. It is so wonderful. You're blessed to be American. I was so floored by that. I was just like, man alive. And now, today, they curse America. Why? Because the world realizes that we've cursed ourselves. I saw in a Dutch newspaper how they called us idiots because we voted in our enemy. I mean, it's one thing to be overtaken by an enemy suddenly who's more powerful than you, but for you to sit there and voluntarily say, okay, enemy, come on in, come on down and destroy the country because we want to prove we're not racist. And you elect a half-black at that. You know, they were telling me, Ron, it's history. This is history. Don't you understand? No. If you really understood history and you were so concerned about electing a black man, why didn't they support Herman King? He's all black. But yet they follow the zebra. Who's plundering this nation to hell. So he thinks. But I'm here to tell you that if we get it together and we, the people, refuse to give in to his goofiness, these liberals that are in office that think that they've got it all under control will find a sudden and swift action against them that will make them look like the total morons that they really are. They are morons in a sense because they are against God. And the Bible says that if you are against him, you are a fool. But in an earthly sense, they are highly intelligent and very evil and very structured and very energetic in their enterprise of evil against our republic. We must become even more energetic, more united, more good in our intentions. And we will win. I can promise you that. And folks, what about the immigration problem? I mean, every day, thousands of enemies walk. They don't run. They just stroll in, you know, like we're walking in the park in the merry, merry month of May. And when I was in Arizona, they took me down to the border. And they must have thought I was suddenly, you know, Mr. Columbo or something. I don't know if you remember that guy, because I just couldn't understand. I said, wait a minute, are you sure this is the border or is this a landfill? Because there was so much garbage. There were even bodies. There was just so much filth and degradation. And I said, this is what they're doing to our country on the way in. And then at the same time, the federal government says, hey, you can have a new house. If you go to Oregon, there are communities where they built new houses for illegal immigrants, gave them SUVs. Hey, they've got their own neighborhood school just for them. I have a friend that was a teacher in New Mexico. And she used to tell me all the time about how the government school students there, the Americans, you know, they had to, if they could afford glasses or whatever, you know, their parents, that's how they got their stuff. But the illegal immigrants, oh no, kimosabi. The government made sure they got checkups, glasses, and anything their little hearts desired, including Mexican chopping beans. Anything they wanted. And guess what? They were told, the educators, yeah, they like to call themselves educators. They were told not to report the illegal students. This is our government bullying Americans against America on behalf of our enemies. Now, if that does not display rogue to you, then nothing will. It is high time that we pray for Governor Perry in Texas, who had the common sense to say, well, thank God that we have a growing economy. Thank God that we grew 40% of all new jobs in America last year. We have the wherewithal. I'm going to put 1,000 soldiers on the border. That's not enough, but that's what we can afford. And we're going to at least try to stem the tide. Governor Jan Brewer, I thought she was fighting a good fight, and she kind of capitulated a little bit. But I understand, you know, sometimes pressure gets to folks. She felt isolated. And when you feel isolated, sometimes that happens. I think we need to shore her up in prayer and in action. We need to go down there. You know, and I'd be willing to go down there with folks. And yes, it would be inconvenient or whatever. But if we don't do something now, the longer we wait to do something, to get active, I mean really active, the more difficult it is. Every year we wait, it's that much more difficult for when we do decide to get active and do something. So why should we wait until it's truly over, until they've totally got us surrounded, until they totally have all the ammunition? I mean, they want to, yeah, sure, you can keep your guns, but now they're in action to shut down the ammunition shops. So, I mean, these people are slick, but we must be wise. See, there's a difference between slick. Remember Slick Willie? But we've got to be wise. Wise always defeats slick, every single time. That is why a self-educated man who lost many elections but never gave up because he had common sense and integrity on his side became our president and defeated the South, during the Civil War and overthrew slavery and kept the Union intact. But today, folks, it's bad, but it's not insurmountable. It's not something that we cannot overcome. It's not something that we have to lay down and just say, oh, have mercy on me, I gotta be quiet. That's the other thing that disturbs me about our side. Our side tries its darndest not to infuriate the other side. But yet, the nicer we are, the meaner they are to us. Have you noticed that? As we become more meek and mild, they become more emboldened. Well, shoot, I can do whatever I want to. They're not going to say anything. But yet, if Salman Rushdie draws a little cartoon about a Muslim, his life is in danger. But yet they can put a cross in urine, and that's okay. And the Christians just walk around and say, oh, wow, that's bad. But then they do nothing about it. And I'm not saying going out and killing anyone, but there are things we can do legally and strongly and ethically to show people that we matter and that we have guts, that we have integrity, that we have chutzpah, and that we're not going to just lay down and take this. And trust me, you can get the other side to respect you. I have dealt with these kinds of situations even on a one-on-one situation. I've had personal encounters with Muslims individually who would call me Habas, which means black slave. They didn't think that I understood their language. And I had to teach them that I wasn't a slave. And so we have to recapture our greatness, which cometh from God, and teach the world that we're not the world's slaves. There is no reason why we should be spending our money to support indirectly the Muslims who are destroying the world, and have said openly since 1979, when they declared war on us, when the Ayatollah took over Iran, when they declared war on the West, on the United States of America, they made a declaration of war and have been acting on it ever since in their style of warfare. But what have we been doing? Well, we had a few times when we socked it to them. Ronald Reagan paid a visit to Libyan dictator Gaddafi's house and blew that place up, and Gaddafi said, man, that Reagan, he crazy. And he was a good boy until he died. That's what the Muslims understand. It is in their Quran. If they are met with an equal or stronger force, they are to recoil and back off until once again the infidels show themselves to be weak. And our weakness in America has been voluntary. It wasn't because someone came and beat us down into submission. We allowed ourselves to be talked or cajoled or what's the other word? Indoctrinated into it through the government school systems. Now you have students coming out of college supporting and promoting out-and-out communism. Communism. Are you crazy? If you want to see the end result of communism and liberalism in America, just go to Detroit. And then I will ask you, is this what you want? Is this what you want for America? Then fine. Then I consider you as an enemy, and you can go wherever, enemies of America need to go. But here's another thing. What about tax reform? I mean, come on. We know, everyone in here knows, that taxes, overtaxation, slows down the economy. We have too many taxes and regulations in our country. We have so many regulations that the stack of regulations would go from the floor and above the ceiling. That's literal. That's the paper, a stack of regulations. And so I could go on and on when it comes to foreign policy, the EPA, government regulations. You know the drill on all these issues. But I want to ask you, are you with me on this? Are we in agreement? There's one more thing I want to leave with you. That none of you had ever, don't you ever refer to me as an African American. I won't like you anymore if you do that. Because I'm an American. That's it, plain and simple. On that note, I just want to tell you this, leave you with this. God bless America. God bless you. God bless Florida. And may America bless God. Thank you so much for your time. We have time for questions and answers.
Yeah, now's your opportunity to run some questions. It's also your opportunity to
Just take that off.
there you go. It's also your opportunity to make a donation. And like I say, we have some travel. He has some travel expenses. So go ahead, ask. Raise your hand if you want the microphone.
I'm assuming that a lot of the people are involved already and trying to do something. I know Ann and I are. I've been involved in over 30 years, and so you're giving a very motivational speech. But what do we do? I mean, what else can we do than what we're doing already? We're doing research on our candidates and people that don't, they just, read the mushroom signs out there and they vote for whatever name they recognize. And so if you have any solid, ideas for us, we'd gladly accept them.
Okay. Well, for one, I can tell you, for example, what we did in Cleveland. When Cleveland was on her deathbed, financially, aesthetically, we joined together and we fought against the Neanderthals in the city council. We fought against the string of Democrat mayors who were just purposely, in my opinion, they were purposely destroying the city, because I used to ask folks in the city via radio, is the quality of life improving with what you're doing? And what we have to remind these politicians in office, let them know that we're not stupid, that we understand that what they're doing is decreasing our quality of life, and that we refuse to anymore take this. I said something very concrete. I said, and I believe that we should take a 21-day work sabbatical and put a stop on this economy and let them know, bam, you're not going to get any more from the till. We have to do something dramatic like that. It's nonviolent, but it's something that is concrete. It worked in Poland. In fact, let me share this with you. When they were praying about that, because it was under the Reagan administration, I was a real young guy. I was in downtown Cleveland, and I saw a circle of folks. They were in prayer in public square in downtown Cleveland. I was so moved because I knew what was happening. I was with a couple of buddies, and of course they called me crazy because I went and joined the circle. I was so moved, and I prayed with them. The only black guy in there was all these Polish folks, but I was like my dad. It was about principles. It wasn't about who was there, but I'm as much for their freedom as I am for America's freedom. And so we have to do concrete things like that. That's one idea. And we have to let them know that we don't trust them. We got to let them know. We have to become as vigorous against their activity as the liberals have been. See, one of the things that we have been on our side, even with our research and everything, we've been really quiet. Amen. I'm glad.
Well, I think, I'm really getting out on the limb to say this, but you could do the research on this, that favor of the DREAM Act. And now, you know, he's our congressman. I don't know if he reaches all the way up here. Does he? I mean, we've got to really look that up, because if he's in favor of the DREAM Act, and he's been in politics for 28 years, you know, it's just a way of life. It's a living, you know. He's going to be here.
Okay, we'll discuss that in offline.
Who's next?
Marge has a question.
Okay, Ron, I wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed your talk, and I want to just tell you one little thing, plus another thing. But first of all, when you gave your little example from the Bible that David beheaded Goliath.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I know he did. Do you think that's a good thing to say right now? With all the beheadings? I couldn't resist. Anyway, that's not really what I wanted to tell you. I think the best thing that you said is that we need to let our young people know how great America is. When we get together so often, so many of us, we talk about how bad things are. When we start talking about how great things are, people listen. And right now, I know a lot of the young people, they look at the president and they say, oh, look at his family. Aren't they wonderful? And that's what they're looking at. And boy, he knows how to fill out all these charts. He's a wonderful athlete. So we need to be positive.
Yes, we do. Thank you. Next.
Any other questions?
Oh, okay.
I have one quick question for you, Ron. You talked about victory briefly. What does victory look like to you?
Well, victory means that America is restored to constitutionally limited law. Victory means that we no longer are, just inhibited by the tyranny of our government. Victory means that we have rolled back the federal government, that the land of the people of the United States of America is back into our hands. That's supposed to be public. This is private property. Victory means that our nation is once again the envy of the world, that our cities have been reclaimed by civilization. Victory means that our education system is not, in my opinion, which is the #1 enemy of our country, because our educational system needs to be revitalized totally from the ground up, and once again teaching the truth to our young. That is victory. Victory is when America is once again the force against evil in the world, and that's just the beginning. Next.
Is there going to be a publication fairly soon that gives the backgrounds of all the candidates that are available and recommendations from the Republican Party, and judges in particular, and people that are hard to get information on?
I don't know.
Yes, if you get the Republican newsletter, that will be out in the next issue on the judges and the amendments. And if you don't subscribe to that already, sign up, and that will be in the next issue,
When does the next issue come out, Jerry?
as soon as I write it.
The reason I ask is most of us who vote absentee ballot have already gotten our ballots.
I understand it, but just hold on to them and be patient. I'll try to get that out in the next couple of weeks. I'm waiting for some more information before I publish. But if you just wait a bit, I'll give that to you.
All right, any more questions?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Just a few announcements before you all leave.
Say, Ron.
The next meeting on October 21st, our normal meeting date, Representative Webster will